Let's talk about cars that people hold on pedestals like they're the greatest things in the world and are completely immune from any kind of criticism. This isn't just going to be about cars from a performance standpoint. A lot of these cars are held on this pedestal more so for their cultural significance. And don't get me wrong, some of them are far from mediocre, but they're not the bee's knees either, like their fans and all of their owners would have you believe. So let's just get right into the first entry, which is the Toyota AE86. For the ridiculous prices that these cars are going for, and the massive pedestal that owners and fans have developed for this car over the years, it's just completely out of control. Let's be honest, alright? Let's just really boil it down. Most of its fame is due to Initial D. Whether you want to admit it or not, don't try to lie to me. The numbers show it. All the data we can pull up, the internet searches, that's its popularity, alright? Yeah, you can tell me that it's a lightweight, tuner-friendly platform that makes a great drift car, but get this, there were better drift cars available at the time of its sale even. So this whole video, by the way, when we talk about tuning, we're gonna disinclude powertrain swapping, because then that'll just be an endless argument. If you're like, oh, well, I can twin turbo LS swap it, it'll be the fastest car in the world, cool, I can do that to a smart car, and then our argument will never end. We're only gonna talk about a car's stock powertrain and how much you can build that. For its stock powertrain, the Toyota AE86, it was a very good one, don't get me wrong. Like I said, it was very tuner friendly, very affordable to work with, very reliable to work with. From a power standpoint, there were still better ones out there at the time even. The main appeal of the anime was for the underdog appeal. They purposely picked a car that was not the greatest thing in the world because it's cool to watch an underdog be able to stomp all these RX-7s and Skylines and whatnot. You know, it's really cool to root for him. But that, again, even the basis of the show is a relic of its time because there are so many underdogs. It's become more of a power fantasy things these days. It's not even about the underdog story, but there's so many anime, TV shows, and movies that have that kind of general trope now that it's so overdone that I'm sick of it. So I've rewatched Initial D just to put it in this video. I can't confirm from a story standpoint it's not that great of a show. It is definitely a relic of its time. The one thing that did age well, surprisingly, was the attention to detail. I loved how they got the engine noise. I'll just say that. The actual noise of the cars was pretty good. And I like that nod to car culture with that. It's definitely like a car guy's wet dream in that sense. A lot of respect was put into it. But the whole Toyota and what we remember of the AE86, it's so overblown. We talk about it like it's completely untouchable, like it's a car you're not allowed to make fun of. Guys, it's just a Corolla. The next entry on this list is actually multiple cars, because this one is consistently evolving, but it's the same, you'll see what I mean, okay? Previous Lamborghini V12s, and what I mean by this is that whenever a new one comes out, everyone, particularly Jeremy Clarkson, I'll use him as an example, he's like, oh, well the old one was better, more primal, more engaged, a lot more raw, and throwing a few Audi sucks here and there, and then when the new one is released, so another one becomes, and makes the one that he just reviewed become the old one, then he'll say all those things about the old one. Oh, that one was more primal, was more engaged, was more raw, and this new one sucks, and Audi sucks. And you get the general pattern it starts. I'm just teasing him, by the way. He's one of my favorite people on that show, but typical hipster syndrome. Let's start with the Countach. Alright, so the Countach, great car. Not really, it had a lot of flaws with it, but it was, for the time period, okay, I will admit, it was a fantastic car. It was way ahead of its time. Yes, it was cramped, but it made those sacrifices to be really small, it had all these weird quirks. And the Diablo, by all stretches of the imagination, was a better car. I remember like Parker in his V12 comparison video, he's like, oh, the Diablo's too much like an NSX. Boy, what are you smoking? The amount of people who said the exact opposite, saying that the Diablo is like the polar opposite of an NSX, that it's one of the most raw Lamborghini V12s to ever be made. I think it's funnier how he thought the Murcielago had brought back some of the rawness compared to the Diablo. Like, the Diablo was way more analog, don't argue me for that. But at the same time, it's not deserving of a pedestal either. This is a car that had bus taillights, it had Nissan headlights, it traded ownership between 3 different companies. A lot of people attribute, so again, let's move on to the next V12. So then when the Murcielago came out, everyone badmouthed it. They're just like, oh, well, the Diablo was the better car. Kind of like how everyone loved the Countach when the Diablo came out. And they would all throw out the same lines, and the most prominent one was just, Audi ruined Lamborghini, even though the Diablo was also owned by Audi in its latter years, and most people actually like the latter years the most. Huh, isn't that kind of funny? And also, before that, it was owned by an Indonesian company called Megatech, which really screwed up the car. Oh, I forgot to mention, aside from having bust taillights and Nissan headlights, its engine wasn't bespoke, which, by the way, that's usually malarkey for Lamborghinis. They're supposed to have bespoke engines. The Diablo had its engine, because of Megatech, it was shared with the freaking Vector M12. And before Megatech owned them, Chrysler owned them. Lamborghini was in its darkest period of its time during the 90s, during the Diablo, and yet people talk about the Diablo like it was the last golden Lamborghini and that Audi ruined them. No, guys, I don't hate to say it. I'm completely confident in saying it, and don't say that this doesn't make me not a Lambo fanboy. I think a true Lambo fanboy would kind of come to understand this, because we wouldn't have Lamborghini anymore if it wasn't for Audi. Audi didn't ruin Lamborghini, they saved Lamborghini. Have you seen what, actually go back, want a lot of people to go, I want people to actually learn something from this video that they didn't know before. Look at what they were doing to the Diablo. So I think it's ridiculous how everyone just keeps blaming Audi for destroying Lamborghini when they're probably the best thing to ever have had happened to them, because before Megatech owned them, Chrysler was kind of just exploiting them. They were using their technology to build their own cool performance cars. Like at the time, well, to be fair, it wasn't all exploit. They did get Lamborghini to kind of help them with the Dodge Viper, and we all know the Viper is a really cool car, but it wasn't mutually beneficial. It wasn't totally beneficial to Lamborghini. Like today, sure, Audi also shares V10s between the Huracan and Audi R8 Plus, but they give a lot. They probably give more to Lambo than take, and to me, that's the best they've ever been treated. And they will repeat the same things about how the older model was more analog and more primal and more visceral, and that's true of any car. As we go further into the future, cars are going to become more technology-based, but comparatively speaking to most cars, I would say Lamborghinis are still fairly analog compared to something like a driving computer that's like a Nissan GT-R. So now let's talk about the RX-7 FD. Now technically I could talk about all the rotaries made by Mazda. I just chose this one because it's the one that's most well remembered. They're lightweight, they're powerful, they sound great, they're extremely compact in design, but in the half century that rotaries have existed, they were still plagued with the same problems since their inception. They sucked at fuel, their reliability was horrible, and they're just generally very fragile. I'm a huge fan of technological optimization, and not all things are created equally, because in the same time frame, a lot of other engine types, like, the standard piston ones, have advanced far more, even to the point that we now have 500 horsepower ones that get 30 miles per gallon. The rotary was a marvel of its time, and it has not really aged well in any logical sense. Yet when you badmouth it or try to criticize it, people are like, oh, you're not a true car guy. Look, I get it. They did. You want your brap. I get that you like the sound. I get that they're truly icon. That's what it is to me. It's a very much an icon. I understand the appeal of rotaries, and I love them as well. But again, stock to stock. If we're talking about building the stock powertrain, it's limited. It is severely limited compared to all the other cars that came out around its time period. Yes, you can throw out the 787B renown and how it was so good it was banned afterwards. And you know what? I do think that was unfair. I feel like if we raced it more and more and more, we may have learned one or two things. One was that the rotary truly was just overhyped and it would start losing and falling behind the rest of the competition. Or B, it would actually stay competitive for several years to come. But unfortunately, we don't know that because it was banned from racing. But what we do know is based on the modern rotaries we have left, people who build them to the moon usually don't get great results. It's usually just because the rotary's aging and it's bound to blow up anyway. So they're just like, all right, time to just brap over the horizon before exploding it to oblivion and replacing it with an LS. And finishing this off, let's talk about early C1 Corvettes. Yeah, I'm going to mention these because I'm a Corvette fan, but also, these sucked. Inline 6, 2-speed automatic. They have horrible styling, even for the time period. Like, okay, maybe not horrible, but not outstanding. Like, if you look at it and look at other cars from the time period, you're like, yeah, whatever. It kind of just looks like every other car. The first couple of years of this car were just a massacre. Just parts bin GM components that were laying about. And a lot of people try to say, well, it's the one that started the Corvette legacy, so you have to respect it because it's first. Alright, so to the person who commented first on this video, do I have to respect him? No, because he put a really uncreative and stupid response on a video that there's so many other things he could have said that would have been constructive to I rest my case is what I'm saying. Just because something is first does not mean you have to respect it. There are so many instances of rushing to be first, making a horrible product. Let's just say the Corvette C1 early years, It's just only a Corvette in namesake, but not in its actual execution or what we remember from it. And you're like, well, how could that be? If it's the one that started it, how can you possibly... Well, just let me talk, all right? Let's use humans as an example. Let's say a baby is born, and up to his toddler years, he just sucks, all right? He's slow, he's annoying, he's needy, and he's really stupid compared to all his peers of the same age. So you could definitely conclude he's subpar. But for the rest of his life, he grows up to not just catch up to them, but to even surpass them. He becomes smart, capable, independent, thanks to improved parenting tactics. Now, when you ask people about his personality, what part do you think they're going to bring up? The 4 years that only his parents knew about, or the rest of his life? That's the same with the Corvette. Most Corvette fans remember everything that happened after the early C1s. As far as they were concerned, the early C1s weren't a productive stepping stone into what we know as today. It's an experimental phase. That's all it really was. It was just GM dipping their toe in the market, because at the time period, a lot of people after World War II were importing exotics from Europe and a lot of, cruisers and grand tours, and they wanted to kind of have something to compete with that. And it was a failed experiment. But in the same way that you can discipline and also nurture a stupid child into a smarter one, GM didn't want to throw out the idea completely, and that's basically when Zora came in. He just kind of looked at the car and was like, yo, this needs to be a fast sports car that slays on the track. This is some half-assed BS right now. And he just took the design and was like, no, this sucks, let's start over. And the C1 later years, and the C2 especially, those are not even comparable to what started. And it's so vastly different. Like I said, it was just the namesake. That's the only thing that ties those vehicles together. The actual execution of the products from the late C1s and especially the early C2s onwards, that was when the Corvette legacy truly began. Those are the years people are going to remember. No one remembers the years where you suck on your thumb as a toddler. In the same way, no one needs to remember the years the Corvette did the same thing. It was basically a toddler sucking on its thumb in its first 2 years. So the whole, you need to respect something because it's first, I don't like that argument, because it was the whole lack of respect that allowed it to grow in the first place. Zora didn't respect it at all. He hated the design so much so that he wanted to build a better one. Things shouldn't be immune to criticism, and that's really the overall theme of this video. We shouldn't just try put cars on pedestals because it can be very counterproductive. Anyways, thanks for watching, and I hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you want to check out more of my videos, here are the links. Other than that, stay safe and see y'all next time. Blade Angel out.